All right, everybody. Let's get started. So this is part 3 of a ongoing review video. Again, the goal here is to review every single video on metaethics on all of YouTube. And if we finish up with YouTube, we could do podcasts. We could do, I don't care. I'll do it all. We're going to review everything. So I'm reviewing a discussion between Sean Carroll, a physicist, and the philosopher Russ Shafer-Landau. Sean Carroll is a moral anti-realist and in particular a constructivist, and Russ Shafer-Landau is a non-naturalist moral realist. So that's a moral realist, a person that believes that there are stance-independent moral facts, who does not believe that those facts can be understood or described in scientific terms. There we go. Okay, I should be back. Stream started. So, Anzavin, you get 1,000 Lance loot. Anthony DeSimone gets 500 Lance loot, and Harmonica Luke gets 250. Yeah, Spirit Nun. Yeah, the sound popped out for a second. The cord came loose, and I just plugged it back in. Oh, hey, Mike. What's up? We gotta figure out when we're gonna talk. So we could do that. The rest of this month is going to be a little bit hectic. I'm popping on here for stress relief. I have so much work to do that it's a little rough. So I'm taking a little break. So I might only be doing this for an hour. We'll see. In fact, I may have to pop out of here sooner. We'll see. We'll see how far we get. But I'm gonna continue with this. All right then. So everybody, let's get started. I'm gonna pick up a few, like about 30, 40 seconds before where I was currently at in the last video, which is only about 19 minutes into the video. And let's get started.
When I introduced them to this idea, but in fact, I think you can be a perfectly coherent, nice nihilist.
Okay.
And also you can be perfectly coherent nihilist and say, look, I think it's a really terrible idea to perpetrate genocide or to smack kids just because, just when you're angry. And that's also coherent.
Right.
All they're forbidden from saying, so to speak, so as to maintain consistency, is to say that their preferences register some kind of genuine immorality or morality. So you can say, look, it would be a better thing for everybody, not morally better, but people would be happier or less unhappy if we acted this way. And that's a perfectly consistent thing for nihilists to say.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's move on to knocking down constructivism then.
Well, my big, there are lots of forms of constructivism, but here's my big beef with constructivism, and that is that I don't think that my say-so makes it so when it comes to morality. I don't have that kind of authority. I mean, I've been doing moral philosophy for 30 years. I'm not terrible at it. I'm not the best at it for sure. But but let's take the person who is, let's focus on people who are among the very best moral philosophers ever. It's still the case, I think, that their say-so doesn't make it so. We are, each one of us, either individually or taken together, is fallible in a whole range of ways. We're imperfect. We've got our biases. Sometimes they're known, sometimes they're unknown. We're in terms of processing information, we all are limited in various ways. We all have our tendentious prejudices, some of which we're unaware, others of which we're aware, but we can't fully correct for. All these things come into play in making moral judgments. And
so a lot of the kinds of mistakes that it's hard to say what exactly he's referencing here as the kinds of things about which we can be fallible. The humility can make the anti-realist sound bad by comparison for what I take to be largely rhetorical reasons, not really very strong intellectual reasons. Imagine someone saying you don't have the authority to make judgments about what foods you think taste good, or that you don't have the authority to make judgments about what music is more or less enjoyable to you. That would sound very strange, right? And so if you view morality the same way in metanormative terms as being ultimately grounded in your preferences or your personal values, then it's a little weird to question your authority on that front. You are an authority on that. Now, let's say you have a preference of living a happy life. Does that make you an authority on the best means by which to obtain a happy life? No. You could be mistaken. You could think that a happy life is one where you make lots of money, and it could turn out making lots of money but neglecting family and friends leads to a pretty miserable life, or maybe not the best life. So the fact that we can be authorities with respect to what our fundamental or ultimate goals are up to a point, is is no threat to anti-realism on dialectical or rhetorical grounds. It could sound like, hey, the realist is being epistemically humble. They're acknowledging that we're fallible. But the only thing that the anti-realist would disagree with the realist about is whether we could be correct or incorrect about what the stance-independent moral facts are, because the anti-realist doesn't think that there's stance-independent moral facts. And so if you don't think that there's facts of that kind, and then you're like, okay, I don't think there's facts of that kind. Now let's go ahead and proceed and go about our business and make our judgments and decisions. There's nothing that lacking in epistemic humility about that. You're not thereby declaring yourself like super infallible in some intellectually suspicious way. If you end up saying, look, our moral judgments, moral discourse is an expression of our emotions. Well, to the extent that you have good introspective access to what your emotional states are, you're an authority on the matter. If it's some constructive matter, then to the extent that you and others are good at operating under some set of constructive procedures for building a set of, shared moral standards, you're an authority, on certain aspects of that. You're an authority on your values. You're not necessarily an authority in other people's values, where the best way is to work together. If you and I want to build a society with thousands of other people, I may be an authority on my values. You're an authority on your values. Does that make any of us an authority on how to best resolve our conflicts? No, not necessarily. So there's lots of things, if you're a constructivist or some type of anti-realist that wants to live in a society and make judgments and get along with others, about which you would not be an authority. The only thing you're not an authority on are what the stance-independent moral facts are. For comparison, if you think morality is ultimately grounded in God, like God's authority or dictates, it'd be a little weird to say that like an atheist is seizing authority insofar as they don't believe in God. That's true, but that doesn't mean that they are licensing themselves to do whatever they want. Sometimes Christians will leverage this sort of consideration. They'll say, atheists just want to deny God so they can do whatever they want. And this is very frequently not true. Atheists aren't just like, I just need excuses so I could, run around doing whatever I want. And it's the same thing for anti-realists. Anti-realists have values. They want to know how to live best in accord with those values, at least much of the time. They suffer from guilt and shame and anxiety. They want peer approval. They frequently care about other people's well-being and suffering. All of the emotions, attitudes, and values that they have don't make them fundamentally all that different in practice from a realist when it comes to deliberating about what a good society is like, or how to live, or what to do. They just don't think that the facts about how to build a good society or how to live or what to do are true independent of their preferences. So, yeah, this sort of epistemic humility, I think, can make anti-realism sound bad, but I don't think there's any teeth. I don't think there's any force to this sort of objection.
And I don't see how it can be that any of us can have the requisite authority to be such that it's our attitudes or our agreements or our judgments that are the ultimate source of morality.
Yeah, another thing that's a little odd about this is the implication that you would need some special kind of authority. Why would I need authority? So like I don't want people to kill me, and I don't want people to kill one another. Do I need authority to oppose that? What kind of authority? So do I need someone else's approval? I need some kind of license from what? Why? So think of our laws. Like laws are things we implement and enforce on one another to serve our interests and our aims and goals. Do you need an extra social authority? So you have a society, right? You have a society, they create a set of laws, right? Now imagine someone saying, hey, I stole this. We all agree that we shouldn't steal from one another and that is a crime. But what authority do you have external to the legal system that we're all operating under and subscribe to? What if I just want to ignore it? What authority do you have to impose yourself on me? And there's no extra legal authority outside the legal system itself. There doesn't need to be. I don't like, if someone wants to break the laws and I like the laws, I don't think I have any extra legal authority to enforce or impose those laws on that person. And I don't care if I don't. I want the laws enforced. That's why I enforce them, or I want them enforced if I'm not the one doing the enforcing. So it's that, this is just a rather extended expression of my preferences and the preferences of the other people living in society. Of course, it's not always true. Laws, societies can have laws that most of us are against. Maybe there's some oppressive regime. Then I might oppose the laws. And again, I wouldn't care about authority in those cases. I endorse the laws up to and to the extent that they, further my interest and the interest of the people I care about. And I oppose the laws to the extent that they don't. And so I am the authority on the laws in a certain sense. I am an authority on my approval and disapproval of them. What I'm not an authority on is their enforceability. So if I don't like a law and a government wants to enforce it on me, okay, well, it's a question of who's got the power there. But that's the thing. That's already true. That just is how reality is. People will be like, oh, so you're saying might makes right? Well, in a descriptive sense, up to a point it does. That doesn't mean I endorse it, though. I'm not saying might should make right, but might does in fact result in right. In like, who would deny that? So this idea that we would need some kind of a special authority to enforce moral rules strikes me as very strange. I don't need any special, like, imagine you're the only person on earth and you're deciding what to eat for dinner. And, you could fish in a stream or look for berries or whatever. And, these are all safe ways to obtain food. Do you need a justification for preferring one type of food over the other, assuming they provide equal nutrition? Do you need to have authority to make personal decisions? No, I don't think so. And who's gonna stop you if you decide to eat one thing rather than another? You eat the apples instead of the berries. Like, what happens? Nothing. And it's the same thing with moral rules. Why would I need an authority? Why do I have to have some kind of justification? This is something that I was speaking with a philosophunculist about. And, I just don't think the enforcement of rules requires any sort of grounding or rationale. You just have values and you act on them.
I guess I just say one more thing to back that up. I'd extend this argument all the way to a critique of so-called divine command theory, according to which you have God, who's perfect, all-knowing, at least, making the decisions about what's right and wrong. So the divine command theory says what's right is right if and only if and because God commands it, wrong if and only if and because God forbids it. I think even that kind of view is problematic. Even so, if even God, I mean, we could talk about reasons why if you want, but if even God's say so doesn't make it so, then surely we imperfect, puny little fallible human beings say so isn't going to make it so either.
Well, but
yeah, so I don't buy the comparison, because if even God doesn't have the kind of authority or whatever, okay, well, I act on my values. So if there's some other person or being that is saying, here's what the rules are, I'm not interested in that person or being's set of rules unless they have some actual practical enforceability. So if there was a God that said, here's the rules, I want you to do this and not do these other things. And let's say we didn't like the stuff on the list. So the God was like, hey, you have to do human sacrifice. Hey, I don't want you to ever eat chocolate. I made chocolate, but that was a mistake. It's too tasty. You can't eat it. And let's say this God like talked to us and I'm like, okay, well, what happens if I eat chocolate? And God's like, well, I don't want you to, it's against the rules. And I say, yeah. But like, let's say that I do, what are you going to do? And the God's like, well, nothing. I don't like, I'm not going to impose, I'm not going to like punish you. I'm not going to strike you lightning. What do you think? I'm a monster? Like, no, look, I don't know what's up with you. Just let me know what you do. Oh, I wouldn't do anything. Okay. So what if I do whatever I want and I don't follow any of your rules? Well, you're breaking the rules. Okay, there's no consequence? No consequence. Okay, then I would just ignore the God probably. Like, as long as I believed it. Like, if it actually is omnipotent, I might be like, I'm not trusting that it's not going to bring down some sort of a punishment on me. The point here is simply that I'm only responsive. So basically, I act on my goals and values. If there's some of external source of potential punishment or reward, then I'll be responsive to that. But if it's simply a list of rules that's not accompanied by any positive or negative rewards that are like relative to or relevant to my values, why would I care? And why would you care? You know? So there's a God, it's got rules. I would follow the rules to the extent that like I wanted to. So if it's going to enforce the rules, or if I I worship the God and think that its rules are like wise and maybe it knows better than me. But the point here is simply that my voluntary action is always going to be driven by my values. If I value complying with the God's rules, then I'll comply with the rules. If I don't, I won't. Why would why would this be any different for anybody else? I'm very puzzled at this notion that like external rules should matter to us. And so when he makes this comparison to God, I actually think it's not a good comparison, because the rationale seems to be, look, why think humans would be an appropriate source of grounding morality if we don't even think God would be, right? As if God would be a better source of grounding for morality. But think about your taste preferences. So you're trying to decide what to eat, set aside nutrition and ethical concerns and other sorts of concerns. You're just trying to have something tasty. Like you already decide you're going to eat ice cream. You're trying to pick out the flavor of ice cream you want to try. You think that is like most likely for you to enjoy it, right? And so you have your own preference. You're seeing all the ice cream, and there's like, just pick your favorite flavor. And then God is like, or some other being or whatever, it's like, but this is the objectively best flavor. And you're like, okay, well, would it taste better? Like, maybe because it could be, you think you're going to like the pistachio ice cream better than some other flavor. Maybe it's a weird flavor, like sesame flavor or something. And you might think, well, I'm not going to enjoy that as much. If the being said, no, you will enjoy it more, like, trust me, and I believe them, okay, they're not going to eat that because I want to enjoy the food more. But if you say, well, will I enjoy it more? And they're like, no, you're not going to like it any more than the pistachio ice cream. Uh, it's objectively better. It's better independent of how it tastes to you. Okay, well, if my goal is to choose the flavor that tastes best, that's totally motivationally irrelevant. I would say, no, thank you. I'm going to go with the pistachio, right? So, if the rules, if the God is a being that is like saying, hey, you should follow these rules because it's actually better for you, and I believe them, then I would consider following them. But if it doesn't actually serve my interests to follow the rules, why would I do so? So the moment you externalize the rules, it suddenly that puts them in a very different relationship to me than if they're internal to me. So God wouldn't be a better source of moral rules in that respect. Now, it's only going to be a better source of rules because God is in a position of ultimate potential enforceability. God could enforce rules in any way that would be logically consistent with the God's attributes in question. So there could be a God in principle that, like, follow the rules or I vaporize you or torture you in hell forever. Okay, I'm going to follow those rules, and hey, if you follow the rules, I'm going to give you eternal rewards. Okay, now I'm definitely following the rules. So it's really a question of enforceability. That's what you could call practical authority, or like actual authority. I don't like the term actual. So there, or you could say enforceable authority. Uh, so philosophers are often chasing this ghostly type of authority, some type of like rational authority or some other type of normative authority that's supposed to be, I don't know why. It's because they are often externalist about motivation. So it may not be a motivating authority, and it may not be an enforceable authority. In other words, there's the moral realist may believe that the stance independent moral facts have some sort of authority over you, but they're not necessarily going to motivate you. And there are no negative consequences if you ignore them. So what kind of authority is that? It's authority, it's, to me, in name only. It's a very strange notion. Yes, as Zictamore says, if you believe God is omniscient and loves you, it seems logical that God's rules could very well be beneficial to you. Right. But see, if that's the case, and I'm not denying that that might not be the case, like I might be epistemically situated where God says, here's the rules. I might follow the rules because I think they're going to benefit me. But if we just stipulate that there is a God that is like, no, there are rules, but there are no consequences for breaking the rules. And for whatever reason, I have infallible knowledge of this fact. Why would I follow the rules? Wouldn't want to. Why would I do that? All right, let's see what else people have to say. Spirit Nun says, honestly, if God tells me something is good or bad, tasty or not, it'll probably influence me as a rational person. Something in me is slightly hinged towards having the preference the perfect being has. Now, that might be true, but that may or may not be like a reasonable response. It might be that I would epistemically hedge. So if Jesus shows up and say, hey, don't eat that, I'm probably not going to eat it. Now, we're often imagining these hypothetical scenarios where you just have some kind of knowledge, like you have knowledge that there would not be negative consequences. You would just enjoy it. It wouldn't harm you down the line. Assuming that we know all that stuff, why would you not eat the thing? Like if you can, for whatever reason, just be assured that it's simply against the rule. My point here is I'm trying to draw a distinction between consequences that manifest in terms of negative experiences, positive experiences, there being outcomes that are misaligned with your preferences, and there being outcomes aligned with your preferences. I am responsive to considerations to the extent that I make judgments about whether the outcomes will be bad from my point of view or good from my point of view. I'm not concerned with goodness or badness independent of my point of view. This is just how I think I'm psychologically constituted, that my decisions are all based on making judgments with respect to my own goals and values. I would be deeply puzzled if people are motivationally wired in any other sort of way. What else would you do when making decisions? Are you just going to subordinate yourself to whatever the quote unquote objective facts are, independent of whether that aligns with your values? How would you do that? Because why would you do that unless you value doing that? So I could see someone saying this: look, whatever the objective moral truths are, I want to comply with them. I don't know what they are, but I want to do what's on that list. Okay, well, if you value what's on that list, it as a sort of terminal goal, like that's just what you value. Sure, do whatever you think is on the list, but I don't. So why would I do what's on the list unless there's some actual consequences with respect to my values? So you see, even in the case that you are motivated to comply with stance independent moral facts, as far as I could tell, the extent to which you do so would be contingent on whether or not you value doing so. You valuing things seems to me to be a necessary condition to be motivated to comply with the facts in question. Now, this is something very similar to a kind of Humean view of motivation. There might be people that are, it's not hypothetical, that reject those sorts of views. Okay, I'd like to talk to those people. Why do they disagree with that? All right. Let's continue the video.
As a constructivist, I don't want to spend too much time, like I said, sort of defending my own point of view here. But my immediate feeling about that would be that somehow it's begging the question that kind of analysis seems to rely on the idea that there is an objectively true statement about what morality is, and then I would agree that we fallible human beings are not necessarily the right place to find that with perfect precision. But if you buy the analogy that morality is more like the laws of speeding or the rules of playing basketball that are constructed, then there's no such thing as the perfect rules for playing basketball, but there's nevertheless what we make up.
Great. That's you're absolutely right. And then just to take it to the next level of analysis, I just invite you to think about the implications of that kind of view. So I don't know what kind of constructivist you are, whether you think that moral principles, correct moral principles, are ultimately founded in each individual's attitudes, or whether it's a group effort. Do you want to
I think it's a
say anything
balance.
about?
Yeah, and I mean, I very roughly think that there is a job for moral philosophy, namely to take the moral intuitions that individuals have and to listen to individuals talk to each other and try to rationally describe what their goals are, and from that to construct something that might not be objective and might not be settled and permanent, but is provisionally what we take to be good moral behavior.
Yeah. Okay, so on that kind of view, to me, the problem is that what has seemed to a bunch of folks to be cogent set of a cogent moral outlook after reflection strikes me as deeply problematic. And you might say, well, Russ, isn't that kind of arrogant? Why are you, Russ?
Yeah, see, I wouldn't say it's arrogant. I would just say, yeah, other people have different values than me. I just take there to be descriptive facts about this. There's descriptive facts about my goals and values. There's descriptive facts about other people's goals and values. This would be true whether you're a realist or not. Some people might value flaying all humanity and like just skinning everybody and turning us all into lampshades. Yep. Yeah. And that would be true whether or not moral realism is true. And too bad for those people if, they come into conflict with me because I'm going to try to stop them or impose my values on them. Nothing about the fact that people can arrive at different conclusions than you or have different values than you carries to me any negative implications, because this would just be a descriptive fact one way or another. Leveraging, like he says, you have to consider the implications of being a constructivist. Okay, so if as a constructivist, you think the way that we should go about, building a moral system or acting on or making moral judgments in any particular situation is to appeal to our own values, this has bad implications because then other people are going to act on their values. Other people already act on their values. So you don't have to make this sort of normative move where you say, okay, my position is I am licensed to act on my values and my values are therefore good. And you're licensed to act on your values and your values are therefore also good. And so if you value like torturing babies, then, oh no, I have to consider it good for you to torture babies. That's some type of weird agent relativism. I'm not obliged to be okay with that. And I'm not obliged to hold the view that you are licensed, like it's good for you, or you have the authority to have values contrary to mine. I don't think anybody has any kind of authority here. It's a kind of category error. I just wouldn't even impute that on people in the first place. So like there seems to be, when critics of constructivist and other types of anti-realist positions are criticizing it, it's almost like they're smuggling in like a sort of partial realism where they think that you are morally legislating. Like, so there's me over here, there's those people over there, and I'm saying, yeah, hey, I get to decide on my rules and they get to decide on their rules, and I have to somehow be okay with them deciding on their rules even if I don't agree with the rules. But I don't think that is an anti-realist. It's that I act on my values, they act on their values. If their values are really misaligned with mine and I have some ability to stop them or impose my values on them, woe unto them, because I'm going to impose my values on them. I would do that anyway. Like, what's the alternative? So there, often there's supposed to be implications, but there are no implications, because if you're an anti-realist, for me, a lot of the anti-realist positions are in a certain sense a kind of a like descriptive observation. So for me, when someone says like there's all these terrible implications of anti-realism, it's a bit like saying, hey, you hold the view that people are selfish. That has terrible implications, because then people would act in their self-interest, even if it meant harming others. Yeah, that is what people do. So like, what's the objection? It'd be weird to say, yeah, but the implication of that is that people do bad things. That you're not licensing people to do bad things. You're just saying, yeah, that's how reality is. So to the extent that an anti-realist is making an observation about reality, hey, I don't think there's these stance-independent moral facts. I act on my values and other people act on their values. What you're doing there is you're making kind of descriptive claim. And, anti-realist views, even the traditional ones, not even my view, are rooted in semantic theses. So they're often, not often, like almost always traditionally rooted in accounts of what people mean when they make moral claims. So let's say that you are an appraiser relativist and you endorse an appraiser relativist semantic thesis. What this means is that what you think is going on when people say things like abortion is wrong is they're saying things like, I disapprove of abortion. So what you get there are a bunch of descriptive facts. You get facts about what people approve and disapprove of. Does that have terrible what are the implications of that are so terrible? That's just an observation about how reality is. And if that's what people mean when they make moral claims, then appraiser relativism is true. Too bad if you think it has bad implications. Like that's how reality is. You wouldn't object to someone saying, hey, I think cancer is real, by saying, well, it'd be bad if cancer was real. So it's a little weird to reject, a semantic thesis on the grounds that you wouldn't like the implications of it. That's weird. So, realists like Russ Shafer-Landau are probably not doing that. They're certainly not, committing a basic error like an appeal to consequences, where they're saying, oh, if this view is true, it'd have bad consequences. I would want there to be bad consequences if the view is true. He's not doing that. the idea, I think, that's often underpinning a lot of the way that realists go about the analysis here is ultimately grounded in a semantic analysis. And it really has to do with something like our intuitions about what we're really committed to and what we take others to be committed to, what we find to be intuitive or not intuitive. And the idea here would be that, oh, 1 second, dogs are barking. One moment. I'll have a look at the chat. Hey guys, I'll be back in 1 second. Sorry about that. Real life happens sometimes. Oh no, and my chair got stuck. Another second. Sorry, everybody. All right. So yeah, and the worst thing about these, like when this sort of thing happens, is you can't cut this sort of thing out because then it gets rid of the live chat, and I want people later on to be able to see the live chat. Okay, so the way that this works is something like this. You're trying to consider what's meant by a sort of paradigmatic moral claim, like murder is wrong or stealing. I don't like murder is wrong because people will say, "Oh, but murder by definition is something that you consider wrong, so it's redundant." I just think that's silly. Killing is wrong, and then people will go, but some cases of killing are justified and some aren't. This is, people get nitpicky, pedantic, and annoying for reasons that are completely unrelated to the point of the statement. And this is why philosophers have started saying torturing babies for fun. So people would stop going, but what about the context? Because most people are not going to start pushing you on the context where torturing a baby for fun might be morally permissible. So, okay, torturing a baby for fun is wrong. The question would be, what do people mean when they make that claim? And then the constructivist or some type of relativist might say, they mean to be making a claim about what's true relative to their preferences. And that's supposed to be counterintuitive due to the implications of it. And so you might then conclude, so that must not be what people mean when they make the claim. So the appeal isn't, if it were true, I wouldn't like the consequences, so it's not true. It's that those consequences, like the implications of that, would be so radically out of accord with what I think people actually think that must not be what people actually mean when they make the claim. So when people make moral claims, they are in fact making these claims about what's objectively or stance independently right and wrong. And so then what you do is you establish a presumption in favor of realism by showing that ordinary moral discourse is committed to moral realism. And so we get to presume that things are the way that they seem, the way that, generally when people talk about there being trees, it looks like most people think there's trees. We're entitled to presume that there are trees unless someone could show that there's not. The skeptic is on the dialectical back foot. The burden of proof is on them. And so the idea here is to establish a burden of proof in favor of realism by showing that views like relativism have counterintuitive implications. The problem is, for someone like Sean Carroll or like myself, I don't know what Sean Carroll would say if prompted to have an intuition about the matter. I don't have realist intuitions. And so these sorts of considerations don't work on me. The other thing about that I find really weird, and I've said this a bazillion times, I'll just keep saying it, is that what people mean when they make moral claims is an empirical question, and it's also not that relevant to whether there are stance-independent moral facts or not. So that's also a bit weird. So, the procedure here is a bit of an odd one. We're invited to consider the terrible implications if we were some type of constructivist. I don't think there are bad implications. I mean, that would be the first point. Even if there were, I don't think that would be especially relevant to whether moral realism is true or false. It might be a reason in a somewhat indirect way to think that maybe people aren't relativists, but all that would do is establish a descriptive fact about what people mean when they make moral claims. There's better methods of addressing that. There's empirical methods of addressing that. Go out and ask people. So at best, you might be able to show that most people don't have that intuition. You might be able to show your interlocutor. So maybe this would be the best move to make, has some type of realist intuitions. And then you might leverage that against your interlocutor. You might prompt them to recognize, oh, I do have some inclination towards realism. And then that can be weighed against the considerations against realism. So that might be what Russ, Shafer-Landau, and other people are often up to, is they're trying to get a person to weigh the considerations for and against realism. And there's often an expectation, a presumption, or at least a hope on the part of the realist that the person that they're talking to will have some type of realist intuitions that can be leveraged as evidence against whatever philosophical considerations they have against realism. And hopefully it might be enough to outweigh those arguments against realism that they are in favor of, or at least weigh enough for them to go, maybe I need to take a step back and reflect on this. And for me, they just don't exist. I don't have those realist intuitions. I don't know what Sean Carroll would say were or if Russ ends up prompting him to see if he has this sort of realist intuition or realist intuitions or not. Okay. Coffee Stick says, I like this one. Abandoning live stream abruptly for fun is wrong. No, my wife returned home. She said she'd be gone for a longer period, and then she just suddenly returned home, and then I locked the door, and then I had to go unlock the door, and then the dog was going wild. I don't know why the dog was going wild, but she's like that. Sometimes you walk in the house and the dogs look at you, they're like, hey, where you been? And then other times they just bark, bark, bark. I don't know what's up with that. You guys have to meet my dogs sometime. I think I picked up one of them in the stream, like a year ago. So I'll have to introduce you. Their names are Pitanga and Guayaba. We've got a Dachshund and a Jack Russell. Okay. Svezi Piatki says, imagine terrible implications of us being made of atoms. Folk will think that we're naught but matter. Yeah. Coffee Smoke says dog stream would be cool. I don't know what a dog stream would be. Like I might be like, here's a dog, but they're not going to talk. So I don't know what else they can do. They're not going to, dance for you. So, I mean, they're dogs. They're awesome, but they're also just, being dogs. Okay, let's keep going.
The arbiter of what's right and wrong. And I want to claim my own fallibility here. But sure. If you take a look at this kind of constructivist position, what it's going to do is it's going to say that in societies or among groups, when across societies, however you're imagining this to go, if they were to make a determination after reflection that it's okay to make women second-class citizens, it's okay to enslave a certain portion of the population, either because their skin color, because of their beliefs, or because they're geographic, whatever it is, then constructivism says, morally speaking, that's right, and that's an implication that I find I just can't stomach.
Yeah, so I'm curious what it is he can't stomach about that. So if you take a view like this, hey, moral standards are standards that people mutually agree to, or something like that, and then there's a society where they mutually agree to make women second-class citizens. Okay, then that's just true, that they have made women second-class citizens. That has no implications for whether you have to approve of that. You could just go to that society and say, nope, you can't do that. I'm against that. I don't want you to make women second-class citizens. So not being a real, like, it could be that if you're a constructivist, you think each society gets to decide on the rules, and you could think all the other societies have to respect that. But see, that's a normative moral stance. That you have to respect that. At the very least, if there is a meta-ethical component to this, the meta-ethical component is entangled in a normative moral consideration. And it's a normative moral consideration that is weirdly kind of realist in a certain sense. Because think about the issue that I have with realism. The issue I have with realism is that it purports to provide me with reasons or rules like to do things inconsistent with my goals and values. Now, if there were a society where they kept women as second-class citizens as a result of some constructivist theory, and the entailment or the implication of this would be that it would be wrong for me to go there and say, no, you can't do that. You have to make women have equal rights. That it would be morally wrong for me to do that. What you see what's going on here. There is a compulsion or a rule that I'm supposed to comply with external to my own goals and values. Even if constructivism were in some sense true, like there's an open question about what that would even mean. Is it a correct account of the meaning of moral claims or something? That doesn't, like, just because people use moral claims a certain way doesn't mean I'm bound by the way people happen to speak English, you know? So people speak English a certain way, and because the way they speak it, they're all implicitly committed to some type of constructivist view, according to which each society is licensed to, have a certain set of values. I mean, first of all, if that was the case, that just would be what morality would be about. And so it'd be a little weird for Russ, Shafer-Landau, or somebody else to object on moral grounds if that's what morality is about, because that would fix what morality is. Morality is about these constructivist procedures. If you don't like it, too bad. Your objection, whatever it would be a non-moral objection. It could be a moral objection, but you wouldn't be able to have a moral objection because that's what morality is. It is the constructivist stuff. If you don't like the implications, too bad. So there'd be that issue. But the other issue is, okay, let's say it turns out the English language or human language in general, I don't know why are we moving from English to other languages in the first place? But even if we did that, okay, so English speakers or let's say everybody, all the 7,000 languages in the world, they're all implicitly committed to constructivism. Okay, and what normative implications does that have for me? What if a type of constructivism where if some society thinks like genocide is okay, then genocide is okay. That's implicit in the way people speak. Okay, let's say that's implicit in the way people speak. Who gives a shit? Would you care? I wouldn't care. I'd try to stop the genocide anyway. What are they going to say? Are they going to, and I'm like, no, I think that genocide is wrong. They go, you're using the word wrong. Sorry, you're using the word wrong. Okay, I don't care. So what are they going to do? Yell at me for speaking English incorrectly? Like what, what kind of implication is that? Like, oh no, I can't stop genocide because if I tried to stop it, I would be using words incorrectly. So philosophers try to extract implications out of this stuff that just don't make any sense to me. What are the implications of this? Yeah, okay, let's say people speak like constructivists. Yep, still going to try to stop genocide. Let's say people speak like relativists. Yep, still going to try to stop genocide. Still going to be against women being second-class citizens. Nothing about any of these views compels you to not act on your goals and values. So if I don't know why my voice is cracking. If what Russ Shafer-Landau is against here, now I'm very self-conscious of the cracking again. If what he's against is this idea that you would have to be okay with people doing stuff he doesn't approve of, you just don't have to do that as an anti-realist. You could act on exactly the same set of goals and values that you currently have. So if he doesn't want to do that, don't accept metaethical theories that have implications that impose external standards on you. I will note the irony of it, though, is that when a lot of realists are objecting to anti-realist views, they're objecting to anti-realist views that seem to have an implication that they may be morally obligated to do things that are what? Inconsistent with their normative moral intuitions. Yeah, that's why I'm not okay with moral realism, because the stance-independent moral facts might be misaligned with my normative moral intuitions. I act on my moral values. So what if the stance-independent moral facts are misaligned with those? That'd be awful. So there's an irony here, which is that the reason he is so uncomfortable with the anti-realist views, he's saying, look at all these terrible implications they have. That's part of the reason I'm against moral realism. I want to be able to act on my goals and values. Doesn't he? So I'm very, very puzzled by this sort of objection to anti-realism. Do you see the problem here? The problem seems to be, hey, if that type of anti-realism is true and other people were okay with torture and genocide and doing bad things, it would be okay for them to do it. It'd be good for them to do it. Ugh, I don't like that. Yeah, I agree. So I reject those types of anti-realism. Now let's look at realism. Well, if realism is true, it might be okay for people to commit torture or genocide or something that I don't approve of. And if you think, nope, that's metaphysically impossible or whatever, okay, take whatever you think the stance-independent moral facts are. They're probably not going to be identical to my values. So let's say I'm a utilitarian and you say, well, I think the stance-independent moral facts include these like deontological moral principles that are not the worst thing in the world, but they're not my utilitarian values. Okay, I'm not interested. I don't want to comply with those. I think that would be bad too. It wouldn't be quite as bad as like a, just genocide or wanton chaos, but it would still be misaligned with my values. And so my rejection would be predicated on the same, like, it would be based on this. I don't want to accept that because it would require me to comply with rules I don't want to comply with. It would require me to approve of or think or regard as good things I don't think are good, that I don't like. So the ultimate arbiter here still seems to me to be our own values. For me, it's a matter of my subjective preferences or something like that, my stances. And for the realist, it's often a matter of their intuitions about what they think the stance-independent moral facts are. So I don't see a big practical difference here. Coffee Smoke says, not sure whether talking about constructivism specifically is problematic with their realist intuition since it's compatible with universal moral rules and absolute principles. Well, Russ Shafer-Landau is being very careful here. He said, this is going to depend on your type of compatibilism. And he tried to get Sean Carroll to provide more details about the type of compatibilism. But Sean Carroll's did I say compatibilism? Constructivism. Sean Carroll's constructivism seems to be a little underdeveloped, or at least not fully articulated here. Like it's kind of he says it's a mix of individual and group. I don't know what that means. What kind of mix? Like 50-50? Like how are they related? Is it some kind of dynamic relation? What exactly does that mean? So he's not offering a very developed account. And yeah, there are types of constructivism or types of stance-dependent theories where there would be universal moral principles. And I would be puzzled at what I don't know what Russ Shafer-Landau's objections to those would be. He might not have all the same objections. He might say he thinks that they're wrong on semantic grounds or some other set of grounds. So take something like ideal observer theory. So you might say, hey, I think the moral facts are the set of moral standards and values that a fully informed and ideally rational agent would endorse. And you might think that would converge in extremis, like all agents, if they were perfectly well informed and perfectly rational, would all actually have the same values. So there's a single correct set of moral values that still stands dependent, still a type of anti-realism. And that would be stuff like, general beneficence and being nice to other people and stuff like that. And at that point, what would Russ find objectionable about that? I don't know, but he might just think that's not how people speak or think. It doesn't, there would be other issues with that, I would presume. But Sean's not being clear on what type of constructivism he's favoring. If he were more specific, I'm sure Russ would have more targeted and specific objections. Grant Miller says, how do you see someone with morals different than you and judge that your preferences are more correct? So that's the thing. I don't judge my preferences as more correct. I have my preferences. They have their preferences. I don't think it makes sense to adjudicate between them because I don't think there's some external standard by which to do so. It kind of be like I'm playing one game, you're playing another. Like I can't say like your game, like it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to say, well, which game breaks the rules? You can only break rules relative to my game or your game. There's no external standard to which you would be breaking the rules. So often it looks to me like when realists are looking at the way anti-realists look at things, there's this sort of phantom residual influence of them thinking the anti-realist just has to think in realist terms. And so they'll ask, like, how do you decide whether your moral standards or their moral standards are better? I don't think one is better than the other. And then they'll say, but then why do you act on yours instead of acting on theirs? Because I want to. Not because I think it's correct. It's because I want to. All right.
If you're interested in learning new things, one great place to go.
Oh, does this suddenly turn into a...
And that's an implication that I find I just can't stomach.
I would like to hear more about why he can't stomach it. Like I want to hear the actual rationale laid out, and maybe he'll get to that.
Some of the best professors can learn probably good and .com fair. I think that as a construct, that's THE great courses. You have to say yes, like the /Mindscape. Right. And I think that that's a perfectly fair. I think that as a constructivist, you have to bite that bullet and you have to say yes, like the process of constructing in different places and in different.
I really don't like this. Yeah, you have to bite that bullet. So biting the bullet is this phrase that's used to mean like accepting some undesirable or unpalatable implication of your views. There's nothing unpalatable or undesirable about like depending on the type of constructivism and the type of anti-realism. And so a lot of times anti-realists will say, yeah, I accept that criticism, or I accept that that's a flaw. They shouldn't do that. What's the flaw? I don't think a clear flaw has been laid out. I mean, it's really going to depend on the type of constructivism. If your type of constructivism ends up looking functionally like some type of agent relativism, okay, I'm going to have some problems with that. And then I'm just going to agree with realists. I'm going to say, well, then you're potentially okay with other people, doing very bad things like genocide. But a constructivist and anti-realist more generally don't have to be okay with that stuff. And so these objections are often targeted at rather weird types of anti-realism, and they're not really applicable to other types of anti-realism. And so, then object to those. But if you're talking to an anti-realist that doesn't endorse those views, I would really like to know what the objections are. And a lot of times the objections are merely verbal, because if you're an appraiser relativist, they'll still try to leverage these objections against you. I don't know why I'm saying leverage so much, but they'll try to raise these objections against appraiser relativism and say, but if you're an appraiser relativist, then if someone else thinks baby torture is good, you would have to agree with them that baby torture is good. No, you don't. That's ambiguous. So what you would have to agree to is that if they say baby torture is good, that when they make that statement is true. And they might still say, see? So you're saying that the statement baby torture is good is true, or at least potentially true. Yeah, the appraiser relativist is committed to that. But, and this is something that I got from Isaac. Ask yourself, what he would like people to do under these circumstances, like let's say you're an appraiser relativist, to say, okay, now you're trying to raise this as an objection. I want you to tell me what that means in my terms, like unpack that. Because what does it mean for the appraiser relativist to say that when a person that approves of baby torture says baby torture is morally permissible, what does it mean for the appraiser relativist to say that when they say that, it's true? Well, because the analysis baby torture is morally permissible comes down to it being relative to the standards of the agent making the claim, or the standards of the agent making the judgment about whether it's good or bad. Then what that comes down to is you can kind of translate the statement baby torture for like torturing babies just for fun is morally permissible. What that means is something like, I approve of torturing babies just for fun, or I regard torturing babies just for fun as permissible. Now, if the person in question does approve of it, or they do find it permissible, the statement is true. But what are the implications of that? What's so terrible about that? Is there some terrible implication about the fact that if a person thinks that baby torture is okay, that person thinks baby torture is okay? That's trivially true. That has no practical or normative implications for you. Just imagine we got rid of the standard moral claims and we made all the indexicalization explicit. And so we went out into the world and we found people that would say things like, hey, I approve of torturing babies. Instead of saying torturing babies is okay, they say, I approve of torturing babies. Well, their statement that they approve of torturing babies is true. And what does that mean? You have to be okay with them torturing babies? No. Does that mean you have to torture babies? No. It has no practical or normative implications. So once you unpack what the appraiser relativist is committed to in saying that when the person says it's okay, like it's true, is something completely trivial.
Times might come up with things that I, Sean, who am also not the ultimate moral arbiter, think are horrible. And I would try to argue those people out of it based on whatever common moral intuitions we have. And I think that as a philosophical argument against constructivism, that argument really only works if, again, you kind of assume there is an objective ultimate right and wrong, and then you're saying, but this method isn't getting it. But if I don't assume that there's an objective right and wrong, then this is the method that we have.
Yeah, well, I agree that I agree actually that this is the method that we have, whether constructivism or realism is correct, where the method we have refers to how it is that we're going to engage in discussions with people who don't antecedently share our views. The only way you can try to make progress there, I think, is to appeal to things that your discussion partner, some things that they're already going to be at least open to hearing and ideally will accept. If you can find some shared bases from which to work, you're much likelier to get to consensus at the end. And that's true like it, whether constructivism is correct or whether realism is correct. But I also want to think, I also think that this scenario is plausible, namely that some people are mistaken and can't be shown the error of their ways. I think that that's a general truth. It's true about flat earthers, for instance.
So if he means that they can be mistaken with respect to what the stance-independent moral facts are, what is the move here? He's just saying, I think that there are stance-independent moral facts. Like a lot of times it looks like when realists are making arguments for moral realism, they're just in various sorts of ways, they just repackage different direct appeals to realist intuitions. So when he says people can be mistaken in what sense? Because you can be mistaken in some senses as a constructivist or as a relativist. Take cultural relativism. Sometimes people critique relativism by saying, if you're a relativist, disagreement is impossible. Or if you're a relativist, everybody would be infallible. That's not true for cultural relativism. So imagine this discussion. Alex and Sam are disagreeing about whether abortion is right or wrong, and they're both cultural relativists. Well, you could have these two respective statements. Alex says abortion is inconsistent with the standards of our culture. And Sam says, no, it's not. It's not inconsistent with the standards of our culture. Well, I don't see any particularly good reason to think people have infallible access to the cultural consensus of their times or whatever standards we're using to determine what the cultural consensus or how the culture exactly is determining what's right or wrong. It doesn't have to be consensus. It could be that there's authority figures in the culture or something like that. And so people could, in a cultural relativist framework, disagree, and it would be the case that one person would be right, one person would be wrong, if they have mutually exclusive positions on the matter. So people could argue, people could be correct or incorrect, even for relativism. And the same would certainly be true for constructivist views. So people can be incorrect about what the moral facts are. The only sense in which people can't be correct or incorrect on constructivist or relativist or anti-realist positions more generally is with respect to the stance-independent moral facts, because there aren't any. It'd be like if you don't think unicorns exist, nobody could be correct or incorrect about whether they like cupcakes. So when someone says, but I want you to consider, I think people can be correct about whether unicorns like cupcakes or not, then you're presupposing, in other words, I think unicorns exist, and that's why people could be correct or incorrect about whether they like cupcakes. Right. And so in the same way, if Russ says, I think people can be incorrect about moral claims, if he doesn't mean it in a stance dependent if he doesn't mean it in the stance independent, in other words, the realism only sense, then this would be consistent with the anti-realist views. And so this wouldn't be any sort of objection. But if he means it in a way that's inconsistent with the anti-realist views, then he's just recapitulating an appeal to a realist intuition. And so this is, again, dialectically toothless. It doesn't move the dialectic forward because it's just another appeal to the same intuition, just repackaged.
And
don't need to tell me.
Yeah, I'm sure I don't. But I also think that's the case in morality. I think that some people...
No, by the way, he's telling us he thinks this is the case, which is fine. But if you don't think it's the case, why should you think it's the case? Someone can repeatedly invite you to consider that it is the case. If I say, look, well, I just think, imagine, well, I don't want to say that because YouTube gets weird. But let's say a person says, I think Bigfoot is real. Let's say they think that. And they say, I think Bigfoot is real. I invite you to consider that Bigfoot is real. And if you say, no, I'm good. I don't think Bigfoot is real. And they're like, yeah, but I think it's possible that these footprints over here are from Bigfoot. You might say, yeah, it's possible. Well, that's not a good example because he thinks it's possible to be wrong in a stance independent sense would imply realism. So imagine someone said, well, I think these footprints are from Bigfoot. I invite you to consider the footprints are from Bigfoot. And you say, no, they could be, but I don't think they are. Well, I think this hair sample I have here is from Bigfoot. I invite you to consider that. Yeah, no, thanks. I don't think that it is. This is what a lot of the realist appeals seem to be. They seem to be various sorts of appeals to, I invite you to consider this other consideration, consider that this is true, that if it were true, it would entail moral realism is true. So you might as well be making another appeal to realism. And if you just keep saying, no, this isn't getting you anywhere. Now, it could be that you didn't consider the various sorts of, maybe your phenomenology, you haven't reflected on it the right way. Maybe there's some thought experiment that when you reflect on it in the right way, you realize, oh, all along I did have this inclination towards realism that I didn't notice. So it's possible for a realist to turn over the right cognitive stone and discover that you were a realist all along. But when these appeals fail, they often have very little left to argue for, and very little like it's in other words, it's like, hey, I'm a realist. I think you might be a realist too. You just have to reflect the right way, and you'll realize you're a realist. But if that doesn't work, is there some sort of external argument that they could use? And if so, use that. And they do have them. There, there's Hume's argument from moral convergence. There's the Hume's ontological argument. There's other sorts of arguments, deliberative indispensability. But often the sort of first line, almost like the first line of like antibiotics or something, the first line of arguments that realists will make are an attempt to elicit realist intuitions from other people. And a lot of times I think that these attempts to elicit those intuitions get mixed up with normative moral appeals and other sorts of considerations, and that people can trip up over themselves in the language that realists use and think that they're having realist intuitions when actually they're having intuitions, like maybe not intuitions. I don't like the intuition talk, but if you can make someone, if a person can end up being confused about whether they're reporting that they think something stands independently wrong and whether they really, really, really disapprove of bad things like genocide, and you get them to think that the latter is or entails the former, the person might go, I guess I am a realist, when really they're just really, really, really against genocide. Now, I'm not, I say you could get them to think this. I don't think that this is intentional on the part of realists. I think that realists are not appreciating that normative and metaethical considerations can and do come apart, and that oftentimes people can mix up abstract metaphysical and conceptual considerations with normative and attitudinal considerations. And if the two are tightly bound together in the way that you're prompting them with questions, you can basically get a person to confuse themselves into mistakenly thinking that they're a realist. And I think this happens all the time. Personally, I think this is a primary way that people become realists, is basically they what's the right way? They're confused into it. That's what I think when it happens. All right, let's see the comments. Yeah, okay. So nothing I want to bring up there. Let's keep going.
We have examples in our public life right now. I'm not going to name names. But we've got examples of people who just won't see reality for what it is.
Right.
Let's forget about moral reality for right now. And there are a whole lot of explanations, plausible ones, for why that is. Self-interest being among them, but not the only one. Let's forget about moral reality for right now. Examples of people who just won't see reality for what it is.
Right.
Let's forget about moral reality for right now. And there are a whole lot of explanations, plausible ones, for why that is. Self-interest being among them, but not the only one. Ideological indoctrination being another. And I think that these forces carry over into morality as well.
So the implication, there's people that won't see reality for what it is, and this carries over into morality. But he hasn't, like, it's possible. Like, we could psychologize and people and say there's people that won't see the moral reality for what it is because of these sort of, epistemically not very virtuous motivations. People, what exactly did he say? Let's have a look.
Being among them, but not the only one. Ideological indoctrination being another. And I think that.
So is the implication that people are anti-realist due to ideological indoctrination? Let me take it back. I think he said something about
explanations, plausible ones, for why that is. Self-interest being among them, but not the only one. Ideological.
So is the idea here that maybe people don't want to accept moral reality, like in the realist sense, out of self-interest or ideological indoctrination? Is that the implication here? If it is an implication, I wish it were made more explicitly. If it's not, I'm not sure what movie's making here. Because he's saying, look, let's set aside morality for a moment. This kind of stuff is involved in people not accepting reality in other domains, and this carries over to morality. It seems like he's implying that ideology and self-interest are, maybe there are two types of motivated reasoning that are prompting people to resist moral reality. But the point here is, if I were arguing with him, would be like, no, it's your job to establish that there's a moral reality. It looks like he's presuming that there's a moral reality and then psychologizing why people resist it. And I got to say, it does sound to me a lot like when theists will say, hey, like we all know deep in our hearts God exists, and then people, because they want to sin, they reject God. It does sound very similar to that to me. What about in the chat? Do you think so? Because it does sound like that to me. And I'm not trying to be overly critical here, because I do appreciate that, earlier in the conversation, Russ like made some remarks sort of defending and to a certain extent, I wouldn't quite say steel manning, but sort of like saying, no, there's like aspects of the anti-realist view that can be defended or that can be understood or are understandable from his point of view. But here, I think there's an implication that there's something, there are these like bad motives on the part of anti-realists. And it's like, okay, that could be true. Could be true. I want to see the evidence for this. Like, is there evidence that I resist realism out of self-interest and ideological indoctrination? If so, present the evidence. That's what I would want to see.
Indoctrination being another. And I think that these forces carry over into morality as well. It's possible for someone to just be blind to the moral equality of a woman or an African American. And there's nothing you can say. And furthermore, there might be no film they're willing to watch or memoir or narrative they're willing to read. And even if they do read them, they may bring their blind, or what I'd call their, what you'd say I'd be tendentiously calling their blinders.
Yeah. Okay. So
to
okay. So fair enough. He's recognizing that he's coming at this from a biased perspective because he's like, you would call it tendentious. Fair enough. I can appreciate that he is aware of how this would sound to an anti-realist.
to the reading or to the film watching, and they may be unconvinced in the end. Now, there are two diagnoses to make from that. One is a constructivist one, which says, if at the end of the conversation the person is not persuaded, then there's no moral reality that they're missing. My view is that they might well be missing something, and furthermore, this is the flip side of the point I've just been making. It's actually much harder on a constructivist view to maintain an attitude of fallibility than it is on the realist view. So it's harder to say what you did. I know.
Yeah, I think I've already addressed this, so I'll try to do it more concisely. One of the issues with the live stream is I could stumble through stuff and grope for a good explanation in the middle of explaining it. So here we're readdressing this issue of fallibility. The issue here is that the constructivist struggles to account for fallibility. I don't think that they do. So the question is fallibility with respect to what? If it's fallibility with respect to the non-moral facts that would be more or less conducive to complying with whatever the constructivist procedures are, the constructivist can certainly acknowledge people are fallible with respect to that. If it's fallibility with respect to, like, they can't be correct or incorrect with respect to the stance-independent moral facts, obviously, it's not just that it struggles with that, it's impossible. It's impossible in principle on the constructivist view, like conditional on constructivism, to ever make mistakes about those facts because there are no facts of that kind. So, let's do a comparison here. Let's say I said, hey, the problem with denying that Bigfoot exists is that it's impossible to be fallible with respect to Bigfoot's like mating habits or dietary habits. So what are Bigfoot's dietary habits? There aren't, like, let's say you're an anti-realist about Bigfoot, right? You reject that there's a Bigfoot. What are Bigfoot's dietary habits? None, because Bigfoot doesn't exist. What are Bigfoot's, mating habits? None, because Bigfoot doesn't exist. Like conditional on there not being a Bigfoot, I can make, like conditionally infallible. I don't even know if that makes sense. Judgments about Bigfoot's behavior, which is that Bigfoot doesn't have any behavior. And so if you're a constructivist, of course you can't be fallible with respect to stance independent moral facts because there aren't any. What's the objection here? I mean, the objection is like, hey, if you deny that there's stance independent moral facts, then you think you can't be right or wrong about the stance independent moral facts? Of course you do. Of course that's true. Now, if someone says, yeah, but I think you can be right or wrong about what the stance independent moral facts are, that presupposes that there's stance independent moral facts. So the objection, this is like objecting to atheism by saying, hey, if you're an atheist, then you deny that God does stuff. Yeah, that's not an objection. That's just stating an implication of the view. Someone says, yeah, but I think God does do stuff. Like, think about how weird that would be. Hey, you're an atheist, right? Yeah. So you deny God exists, right? Yeah, I deny God exists. So, I mean, but if that's true, then you think it's not possible for you to do anything that God approves of or disapproves of. And you're like, yeah, because I don't think God exists. I'm like, yeah, but I think you can do things that God approves of or disapproves of. And so because I think you can do things God approves of or disapproves of, you shouldn't be an atheist. You should be a theist. You see how weird that is? It's like, well, yeah, you can only think God can approve of, disapprove of things conditional on God existing. So this works the same way for the fallibility that Russ is talking about. So he would have to unpack what he means by fallibility. And in other words, the point here is that if you disambiguate what he means by fallibility, it's either going to be false because it's fallibility consistent with anti-realism, or it's going to be trivially true. It's fallibility that presupposes the existence of stance-independent normative facts about which one can't be correct or incorrect. And then the objection to the anti-realist view is, hey, I think there are stance-independent moral facts, and so this view that denies that there are, it's got to be wrong. What? That's not an objection. It's just saying, hey, the view is wrong because it disagrees with the contrary view. What? So this is not a good objection.
No, I'm doing all the talking, so I
No, you're here to
apologize.
talk, please.
Yeah. It's harder to say what you said 3 or 4 minutes ago from a constructivist point of view than a realist point of view. And what I'm referring to is your profession, your admirable profession of fallibility and humility about things. If constructivism is true, then I'm not saying this is your view, but let's just take a simple kind of relativist view about morality, according to which morality is grounded in some kind of social or cultural consensus.
Right.
Whatever follows from the deep mores of a culture or society is what's morally right. On that picture, here's what you need in order to know what's right and wrong. You need to know what your society stands for or what your culture stands for. And so long as you do, and you're not benighted about the relevant empirical facts on the ground, then you've got moral knowledge. If your culture is built on a rejection of the equality of women and men, if your culture is built on the view that women are there, are here to serve men, that's one of the founding ideals of the culture. Then, so long as you know that and subscribe to it and can see how that plays out in the ordinary, say, domestic lives of women, and then it turns out you know a woman's place, morally speaking, you know a woman's place, and that is to serve her man or her men. I think that not only is the moral implication of that repugnant, but I think that it makes moral knowledge actually too easy to get. I know.
If you think that what moral facts are the facts that your society approves of, then yeah, it can be fairly easy to get the knowledge. So if someone then wants to say, no, 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 but I think it should be harder to get moral knowledge, they're again appealing to some type of intuition that makes more sense on realism. What if you don't have that intuition? I'll be right back in another second. Oh, I'm so sorry. There's real life stuff going on that keeps interfering. This doesn't really happen that often in these streams, but and YouTube, why can't you just snip out the part of the people posting if I edit this to remove it? Why can't you do that, YouTube? It's beyond your technological means. Nope. So in other words, you have the whole live chat going, right? If you edit 5 seconds of the video, it just says no more live stream. Just fuck you. You don't get any live stream chat, right? It gets rid of the chat. Why? Why can't they just remove that part and have it skip over? It's just impossible for them to do that. So no, you can't edit it. Or so now there's these big gaps in here. So I'm sorry, everybody. It totally ruins the continuity of the stream. People listening have to skip. It's super annoying, and YouTube makes it unfixable. So you know what? Screw you, YouTube. That stupid design. You suck, and you piss me off. And I'll complain about another thing that YouTube does. And like the video and subscribe so that you maybe an extra person at YouTube will see this video. The other thing you're doing is you're hiding comments in the comment section. Just make them disappear. Why can't I have a setting that says display every freaking comment that people post in the comment section? Display all of them. I want to see the comments. I can't see some of your comments unless I fiddle with the settings, and they're arbitrary. And it also deletes people's comments, hides people's comments. I've had people accuse me of deleting their comments, and I didn't do shit. It just refuses to post their comments. It just thinks everything's spam. So their spam filters are way out of line. They filter out everything, and then they do all this other stupid stuff like this. And never mind the algorithm. They decide which things they're going to promote or not. It's nonsense. YouTube sucks. So let's complain about that. There's a bunch of crap on here, and always pushing of reels, shorts, and all these channels trying to make let's just give everybody ADHD and damage everybody's brains because let's play on everybody having a short attention span. So if someone does a long stream, screw them. We don't want to promote that. Back in the day, it was more egalitarian. If people produced content, YouTube was cool with people producing stuff. And these days, it's all about just trying to shuffle garbage onto people. Stupid ass short videos. And I've had so many people say, make short videos. I can't get complicated ideas out in 30 seconds, and I don't want to, and I'm not going to. So people can piss off with it. I'm not doing it. For a while, I was like, maybe I should just sell out and do videos on things people want to hear about. I could do some listicle video. I could sit here and do this video where I go spend $500 on some fancy camera or something, and then I talk like it's ASMR, and I'm like, hey everybody, today I'm going to tell you all about my 3 favorite books in philosophy, and then just go through 3 stupid ass books. Maybe I got them for free from some publisher or something. I could do that. And then maybe that would get hundreds of thousands of views. I could do a video, as long as it's a list, it doesn't matter what the list is. So it could be 7 reasons for rethinking your position on meta ethics. Like I could do a video like that. I bet it would get more views. Ugh. Oh, it's nonsense. It's nonsense, the kind of content people want to consume. It pisses me off. So, this is another thing. People talk about, you wouldn't want to impose your aesthetic preferences on other people. So why is it okay to impose your moral standards? Sometimes I want to turn around and say, you know what? I would impose my musical preferences on other people if I could. You know what shit people listen to? They listen to garbage. Like sometimes I turn on the radio just out of anthropological curiosity, just to see what people are listening to these days. And every single time it makes me want to like, I don't know, launch my ears onto other sides of the planet. That doesn't make any sense. But I'm just like, this is the worst. The lyrics suck. The music sucks. It's simplistic. It's an auto-tuned and fake crap. What is that song right now? Espresso, the Sabrina Carpenter. I can't even understand what she's saying. She's like the worst diction of anybody ever. Think about me. I mean, what the hell? Use your mouth when you're singing. You're singing. Use it. Jesus, she can't sing. She's a freaking professional singer who can't sing. Jesus Christ, the lyrics are stupid. Also, it's a song where she's like gloating over manipulating men. Why would I want to hear that? Why would I want to hear, hey, I manipulate people? Who wants to do a song about that? Why would I want to hear that? Why would I want to hear about someone being like a freaking sociopath? Why? That's not the good lyrics. It's not uplifting and nice. What the hell is that? It reminds me of all these other songs. They're always like encouraging people to do awful stuff. And I don't know that it actually has any psychological consequence. Like people are going to go, oh, the song says, do this and this. So I'm going to go do, I'm not saying that, I remember people like complaining about Marilyn Manson's music and they're saying it's going to make kids do bad stuff. I'm not complaining about that. I don't want to hear it. Those aren't nice lyrics. I want better lyrics. I mean, look, if I better lyrics, it doesn't even have to be nice stuff. I'm not saying every song has to be about puppies, but if it's some song like "Let's Summon Demons," cool. That's cool. I like that. But and that's not a good message. I'm not in favor of summoning demons, but like at least it sounds cool. Just someone saying that's that me espresso. That's what she says, right? That's stupid. It's just stupid and lame. Ugh. So, yeah, just no. So YouTube sucks, and that song pisses me off. And yeah. Should we get back to the video? That is the most ridiculous thing. I think that might be the most ridiculous thing I've ever done on this channel. Is just a random rant about stuff that bothers me. I don't know, thumbs up or thumbs down for that. I don't even know what. Just I had to get that off my chest. All right. Coffee Smoke says, what song is this? I'm talking about Espresso. I can't play the song in here. There's like copyright stuff. So you'll look it up, I guess. Patrick says, what about summoning puppies? Yeah, the dogs have been running all around. I was summoning them earlier with food. All right, let's keep going with the video. I don't know what's going on today. Ugh, this is going to be one of the weirdest streams. Random interruptions and ranting about music. You know what you should do? You should get me ranting about Game of Thrones because, people talk about how season 8 was terrible, but season 5, season 6, season 7, they were all garbage. It just, everything after season 4, I hated it. Hated all of it. Season 5 was garbage. I like the last episode, or was it the last episode or the second to last of season 6? Other than that, garbage. Hated it all. There's some good scenes, like Podrick singing, I think in season 8. That was good. But other than that, it's not good. See, I don't think those are the lyrics. Think about me every night. Oh, baby, that's. Does she say baby that's neat, or does she say is it that sweet? Like a question, like is it that sweet? I guess so. Or isn't that sweet? Isn't that sweet? I guess so. I think she says that. But like I don't like that attitude. The attitude is like, hey, this person's thinking about me a lot. Isn't that nice? I guess. What kind of attitude? It's like you don't even care. Why would I want to hear about that song? It's like, people could sing about like romance. Like I met this person and I fell in love with them. And I'm full of all this like excitement of falling in love. But imagine a song about a person that's like, yeah, I met a person. They're all right. Yeah, they're okay. They're like I wouldn't call them a friend. I call them an acquaintance. Like imagine a song about how you have a new acquaintance. What the hell is that? That's not interesting to listen to. Or how about you got into a conflict with somebody and it kind of just fizzled out anticlimactically? That doesn't make for a good song. I think of songs where it's like there's some drama or something. Like for whatever reason, the one I thought of is Dolly Parton, like the Jolene song? That there's drama there. But like this song, there's none of that. I'm not getting back into the song ranting though. The Coffee Smoke says everyone agrees that after season 5, it's mostly garbage. Yeah, I'm not gonna get onto that now. Carlos said, "Oh right, isn't that sweet? I guess so." Yeah, see, I was right. I think I looked up the lyrics at some point, but I can barely remember them. But there are songs where I struggle to understand the lyrics, but then when I look them up, I'm like, oh, this is kind of awesome. So yeah, like Tool lyrics, I always think are cool. So like Right in 2, I think the lyrics for that song are cool. Anyway, let's keep going with the video. This has nothing to do with meta ethics.
I think if you were to say, well, Russ, that's tendentious. That assumes that there's an objective morality that these folks are straying from, and it assumes that there's an objective morality that might be more.
Okay, let's get some more context. What assumes there's objective morality?
In the ordinary, say, domestic lives of women. And then it turns out a woman's place, morally speaking, a woman's place, and that is to serve her man or her men. I think that not only is the moral implication of that repugnant, but I think that
so when he said the moral implication is repugnant, is the idea that if you're a constructivist, you're committed to a repugnant view. Like, what exactly is the objection here? I still do find this deeply puzzling. The constructivist or these other sorts of anti-realist positions can be offering these as descriptive accounts of the meaning of moral claims or like what morality is about. Facts about what morality is about, you don't have to endorse them. So if the implications are repugnant, too bad. That's what morality is about. If moral facts just are facts about constructed moral systems, like let's say they're similar to the laws of societies. Hey, I think laws are things people construct. Like, and I do think this. Okay, well, so imagine this view. Hey, okay, so what do you think laws are? Oh, I think laws are these things human societies invent and then they enforce on one another. Imagine if someone said, but some societies have laws that say it's okay to torture people or deny women equal rights. That's repugnant. Yeah, that is repugnant. But what is it repugnant? What does that mean to say it's repugnant? Well, it's repugnant relative to my moral standards, right? So if Russ is criticizing this view as having repugnant standards, like you could just agree and say, yep. And nevertheless, that's what's going on here. People are constructing these systems, and relative to my personal standards, some of them are repugnant and some of them aren't. It doesn't like what exactly is the issue here? It's saying it's repugnant. What's the takeaway? We're supposed to be. I don't know exactly what the objection is. Like, I'd like to have this laid out. What exactly is the objection when you say that's repugnant? I feel like there's some normative entanglement going on here. Like, there's some implication that if you endorse the anti-realist view, that you're a bad person, or that you have repugnant views, or that you're okay with repugnant views, and none of that is entailed by anti-realism. It might be entailed by whatever type of constructivism he's imagining. Is that what Sean Carroll endorses? Does Sean Carroll think that if a society decides that they're okay with torture, that Sean Carroll is okay with that society, committing, like, doing torture or genocide or whatever it is? Is that what he thinks? Because what if he's like, no, that's not the type of constructivism I favor. We would have to unpack what specific type of constructivism there is in question. But I will reiterate that the objections are going to come down to these, like, ironically, like, there are similar reasons why an anti-realist might object to realism. And also the objections look like normative objections. They're objections to anti-realist views that have sort of semi-direct normative moral implications. But lots of anti-realist views don't have those types of normative implications. And I wouldn't understand, what would the objection to those be?
It makes moral knowledge actually too easy to get. I think if you were to say, well, Russ, that's tendentious. That assumes that there's an objective morality that these folks are straying from, and it assumes that there's an objective morality that might be more difficult to get than by means of the sort of sociological knowledge I've just described. That's the consistent thing to say. So I'm not going to say anything that's going to indict constructivists on the grounds that they are necessarily have an inconsistent view. You can definitely coherently build up any number of constructivist views. I'm just pointing to implications that repugnant is a strong word, but with regard to that particular conclusion, it's one that I do find repugnant, and I think there's no easy way out of that conclusion. Two conclusions, really.
There's no easy way out of the conclusion that he finds it repugnant. I mean, that might be true, but like, I'm not seeing anything by way of, like, as an anti-realist, why should I not be an anti-realist? I'm not getting much here.
One is that when you think about the actual substantive moral implications of a view like that kind of relativism, I think they're very hard to stomach. The second conclusion, which is the one I should have really been focusing on, is the point that if you're a constructivist, it makes, perhaps paradoxically, it makes moral knowledge too easy to get. Most moral view, but I do think it's a problem with a moral view. I think that the intellectual virtues of modesty and humility, the recognition of your own fallibility,
Yeah, this seems like normative entanglement here. Modesty, humility. The implication here is that if you're a constructivist or perhaps other types of anti-realists that don't think you could be right or wrong about moral facts, that you're immodest, that you're lacking in epistemic humility. And I just don't agree. If you're an atheist, are you lacking in epistemic humility because you don't think there's facts about what God approves or disapproves of? No. If you're a physicalist, are you epistemically are you immodest and lacking epistemic humility because you don't think there's facts about what the non-physical mental substances properties are? No. So like denying a metaphysical view and that having an implication about you not having epistemic access to like facts about the content of the stuff that you don't think exists, there's nothing immodest or lacking in about that. This is not a good objection.
Sit best with a realist view. I mean, you're a physicist. What's the right attitude for a physicist to take about the cosmos? It's humility and a recognition of fallibility.
Yeah, this is a good point from Andrew Moy. So Andrew Moy says, the times I hear Shafer-Landau argue, it seems like his method is, there might not be a contradiction in anti-realism, but I'm just going to hope I catch the anti-realist in a contradiction. I think that that's something that is going on here. He's very clear that it's possible to be a consistent constructivist. Yeah, I think I'm a consistent anti-realist. I'm not a constructivist. But the expectation is like maybe I can uncover some way in which your view has an internal contradiction, and that's a perfectly fine strategy. Like that could be true. It could be that a person that's an anti-realist discovers that commitments that they have in virtue of being an anti-realist are inconsistent with commitments that they have that would only be possible if they're real, like only be sustainable if they're realist. And so then they have a decision to make to get into reflective equilibrium. I mean, in principle, you could just say, no, I'm fine being in disequilibrium. I'll just have views that are in tension or contradict each other. That's a weird thing for a person to do, but I don't think people are incapable of doing that. But if they want to resolve the issue, in other words, someone says, hey, you think P, but I think you also think not P. And they go, oh, I don't know. Do I? And then you walk them through some thought experiments or whatever. And they're like, oh, I do think not P. Uh-oh, now I think P and not P. I have to make a decision here. And that's when a person discovers that they are in reflective disequilibrium. And they have to get into reflective equilibrium by dropping one or both of those views. Maybe they become agnostic. Maybe they reject P. Maybe they reject not P. And so Russ's strategy here is a perfectly reasonable one. It's to say, hey, if you go around saying P, I think you might be, without realizing it, committed to not P. Let's find out if you are. And if you are, now you've got a decision to make. And you could decide to reject not P and then just remain a consistent anti-realist of whatever kind. I think you'd be fine with that. Like you would still think you're mistaken, presumably. But there's nothing wrong with a strategy in principle. It's just that for someone like me that, I've turned over all those stones. I don't have inconsistent views on the matter. If I'm wrong, it's not due to inconsistency. It's not dialectically very interesting to me. And if this is the only dialectical move he had, his move would hinge on all of his opposition being like implicit realists. So what you would really be discovering is everyone actually really agrees with you. They just don't realize it. And there are realists that sometimes argue in this way, but the realist can, in cases where the anti-realist ends up having consistent views, and I think Russ probably has colleagues that would say, no, I have these consistent anti-realist views. He would have other arguments for them. So again, this is like the first line of objection. It does not mean he doesn't have other objections. So certainly don't make the mistake when realists try to appeal to people's intuitions, to think that that's all they have, that the only thing that they appeal to are intuitions. They do have arguments, and not all those arguments are direct appeals to intuitions. It does often seem like they depend. It's not that they exclusively depend on appeals to intuition, but I think they depend on them so heavily that when you take them out of the equation, I don't think realists have much left in their arsenal. I really don't. I don't think it's empty, but I think that what's left is not very impressive.
And modesty, and the explanation of why those are the appropriate attitudes to take is because you don't get to make up the truth. You're there to discover a truth not of your own making. I think the same is the case when it comes to morality.
Andrew Boy, I'll take this back a few seconds because I think this is a good point worth addressing. I can't speak tonight. I'm gonna close out the stream probably in 10 minutes because I am inarticulate. I got interrupted a bunch of times. I gotta go live the rest of my life. So I'll have to do another stream. I'm sorry, everybody, for this one being such a sloppy mess. Andrew Moy says it might be fine in a given discussion, but in principle, you can't refute anti-realism as a view like this. That's right. Yeah. So this sort of dialectical move is a way of showing that a particular person has inconsistencies or tensions in their views. It can't actually show that a particular perspective is false. So this showing that some people might be realists and didn't realize it, and then that person might, to resolve the dissonance and the tension between their anti-realist and realist commitments, reject the anti-realist ones and become a realist, doesn't show that anti-realism is wrong. What it would show is that person is inclined to become a realist on reflection. But it doesn't show anything that, like, it doesn't show anti-realism is false. So what I would like to see are arguments that would show that anti-realism is false, independent of whether I have an implicit commitment to realism. So could you show anti-realist views are false or incorrect, misguided, whatever it might be, without showing that I'm actually a realist? What does that look like? And, even arguments like moral convergence, I that doesn't directly appeal to a realist intuition, but I just find it like, it's a type of abductive inference. Like, what's the best explanation for why moral standards have become more similar over time? I just think the realist explanations are not very good ones. So, there are arguments like that don't directly appeal to intuitions, but I think they're very, very weak. Coffee Smug says, Lance, have you talked about projectivist or causal accounts of moral experience? It's a realist account because wrongness exists in the world, but it's just a property of giving rise to the sentiments. Yeah, so this is some of the stuff that would feed into like the quasi-realist views. So I could say a couple things about that. So no, I haven't talked about it. One, I'm not that drawn to the quasi-realist views, and I know projectivism and what is the other main component of the quasi-realist stuff? Oh, there's like deflationary views of truth. There's a few other components, and often they sort of congeal into quasi-realism. That makes it sound bad. I don't hate quasi-realism, but I see a lot of what quasi-realists are motivated to do is this sort of concessionist strategy where they cede certain. Oh, it really looks like people talk about moral facts in a realist way, but I don't think they do. But how can we vindicate moral language without having to fully concede to the realist? I'm just not drawn by that motivation, and so I don't like that aspect of them. I don't like that move. I think it's too conciliatory. But as far as the projectivist stuff, is it making an empirical claim? Is it testable? That's the kind of stuff I would want to know. And then I would want to go test it. So if they're not making empirically testable hypotheses, I'm not going to be that interested. If they are making empirically testable hypotheses, I'd like to know how to test them and then go out and test them. So generally speaking, that's going to be the perspective I take on certain aspects of that. Grant Miller says, it seems like you could make a good argument for having humility from an anti-realist perspective, so I'm not really understanding his objection here. Right. I think so too. But this is why I said, what is the humility supposed to be about? So sometimes people will say this: if you're an individual subjectivist, you think moral claims express your preferences or values. Well, they might say, well, then you think you're infallible about what's morally right or wrong. Clearly, we're not infallible about what's right or wrong, so you shouldn't be a subjectivist. This is real weird for lots of reasons. I mean, one, let's say you think moral claims express your preferences. Do you have infallible knowledge of your preferences? I don't think I do. So, like, one is, I just don't think, even if you were a straight up subjectivist, I wouldn't endorse an infallibility about that. So if and here's the other thing about that. Let's say someone says, hey, I think, let's say you're a realist. You say this: I'm a realist, and no one clipped that. I said I'm a realist. Oh no. Well, I didn't say moral. Let me just say it so you can have the clip. I'm a moral realist. Look there. Now you have a clip. Okay. I sound really silly saying that. So, like, my tone. So let's say you're a moral realist and you think people are infallible with respect to what their subjective preferences are. So you think, yeah, I think there's stance-independent moral facts. I also think people have infallible access to what their preferences are. So if you prefer chocolate over vanilla, you have infallible access to that. Okay, so then you come along and you say, okay, well, hey, I'm a subjectivist. I'm going to argue that subjectivism is true, and that moral facts are actually expressions of your preferences. It'd be a little weird to say, okay, but that can't be right because if that were true, we would be infallible about what our moral standards are, but we're not infallible about what our moral standards are. So that has to be false. Well, if subjectivism is true and you think people, in other words, if you think we are infallible about our preferences and then you think someone says moral standards express our preferences, then okay, what's so implausible about saying that we're infallible about what our moral standards are? If you think moral standards are expressions of your preferences, you think they're infallible about their preferences. So if you say, okay, but I just don't think moral standards express preferences, okay, then you're rejecting the view, like with the objection to the view, hey, I think moral standards express our preferences is, hey, but I don't think that. What the hell? It's like saying the problem with atheism is that it rejects the God's existence. That's not a good objection to atheism. It's just saying the objection is an assertion to the contrary. So a lot of these objections are real weird when you unpack them. They're often ambiguous, right? It sounds bad to say, hey, that anti-realist view, if you're an anti-realist, you think you're infallible about what the moral facts are. That's really arrogant. But if you unpack it, okay, what is the infallibility about? The infallibility is about what your preferences are. So you could then ask a person that says that infallibility about your moral values is objectionable. Wait, do you think people are infallible about their preferences? And if they're like, well, yeah. Okay, so then what's so implausible about the view? Yeah, then people are infallible. They're infallible about their preferences. Big deal. But if you ask the person, do you think people are infallible about their preferences? And they say no, then it wouldn't follow that the subjectivist view it involves infallibility. Again, you have this problem. You have this idea, infallibility. Disambiguate it. When you disambiguate it, either it's true but trivial, so what's the objection, or it's false, so it's not an objection. And this happens all the time with philosophical arguments. They're ambiguous. You disambiguate them, and once you disambiguate them, they're either completely vacuous and they don't raise any good objection at all, or they're not true. So you just have to disambiguate. And I think so many philosophical arguments rely on pragmatic implication that results from a failure to disambiguate what's meant by some technical or narrow conception of what's meant by some term. So you have this term infallible, and we're not unpacking, well, infallible about what? And once you get clear on that, the whole thing falls apart. The whole thing unravels. All right. Let's see what's else in the video. Maybe I'll do another 5 or 10 minutes.
If you're a moral realist, you ought to be humble about your moral opinions and modest in their expression, because
here's a question. Do you think moral realists tend to be humble and modest about their moral standards? Do you? Because I don't think I've ever met a moral realist that strikes me as especially humble about their moral standards. That's not been my experience. I don't see anti-realists coming off as especially arrogant and lacking in humility about morality. And if anything, look, we could go out and do studies on this, like people that see if people that prefer realist responses to meta-ethical questions tend to be more overconfident, less humble. I'll bet you they are. So this idea that in principle, there's this type of humility associated with realism, I don't think it works out that way in practice.
because you hold the view that there is a moral reality out there that's not of your own making.
And yet, some of my best friends are physicists and cosmologists, and not all of them are characterized by enormous amounts of humility. Interestingly enough, no, I think that I more or less agree with everything you're saying. As I said, I think.
Yeah, too many concessions from Sean Carroll. Why is he agreeing to this?
I think that the constructivist has to bite the bullet about the fact that
again with the biting the bullets. What bullet does he have to bite? There's no, and there's a recent video I saw with Alex O'Connor where he's like, yeah, I guess an emotivist has to bite the bullet on that. No, you don't have to bite bullets. There's no bullets to bite here.
Even in good faith, I mean, we can come up with less repugnant versions of the fact that
it's conceding it's repugnant. There's views of constructivism and certainly views of anti-realism that are not repugnant, or at least if they're repugnant, they're might be repugnant to a realist. Well, so what? I think realist views, could be repugnant in certain contexts. But so what? That's just dialectically irrelevant. Why would a realist care if I think some of their views might be repugnant? I don't think they should. I don't think they should care. I don't care if they care. It's not that important for someone to go, ugh, I think your view is gross. That doesn't move the discussion anywhere.
That people thinking in good faith, either individuals or groups of individuals, societies, might end up constructing versions of morality that I find deeply distasteful. And that's something that the constructivist has to live with. On the other side, the constructivist is going to say, so one version of constructivism might say, but the world is out there and it does things and I can do experiments on it, and morality is not out there. So you, moral realist, why don't you make the positive case for something that is objectively true there?
Oh, good. Thanks.
Yeah, so that's a good place to stop there because they're going to shift gears in the conversation. All right, this was a wild time tonight. Oof. All right, but I needed it. I needed to get out of the headspace of all the work I'm working on. But as you could see, I'm a little distracted and scatterbrained, and it didn't. I don't think this went very smoothly. But I hope you all had fun. I'm gonna end it there. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, throw some comments in here. I feel like this is a mess. Maybe I'll review it later. Should I take the video down? I just feel like this is such a mess. Ugh. I don't know. The semester just started. I already need a break. No, I'm okay. I'm okay. I just need, I don't know what I need. Some good sleep. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Patrick. Patrick says, cheers, Lance. Objectively good rant. Appreciate it. All right. I'll catch y'all later. Take care, everybody.